province. Your southern Alberta, from the heart of Lethbridge. It's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks for joining us for our weekend review. Eyes around the world have been on Eastern Europe as Russia's invasion of Ukraine moves into its second week. It's affected people globally, including right here in southern Alberta, where a rally drew hundreds who stand in solidarity with Ukraine. BCN's Angela Stewart was there and heard from some protesters who said it was great to see the community come together and show support.
Chanting could be heard from the steps of City Hall over the weekend, where people from all over Lethbridge came together to stand in solidarity with Ukraine. Hundreds of supporters holding signs with the messages, "Support Ukraine, pray for Ukraine," and even "Stop the war." After hearing about the events unfolding in his home country, rally organizer Misha Perevrasa says he couldn't just sit back and watch.
My wife received a call from Ukraine that the war started. So I wasn't able to just sit. I don't know, it just was something internal inside me. So it turned me out to the position where I have to do something.
Perevrasa, who has family in Ukraine, told reporters he can't believe what's happening and he fears for his relatives.
They are under the bombing right now. So they just sit in the basement. It's terrible. I just cannot imagine anybody from you sit in the basement and think that maybe some bomb will fly to your house.
Some local officials could also be seen in attendance showing their support and standing in solidarity. Liberal Party candidate Devin Hargreaves says the events unfolding in Ukraine hits close to home.
I have family in Ukraine, in Lviv, so it is a very personal issue for me as well. We've got family, friends.
This supporter, Tom Frankish, says some of his closest friends are currently fighting in the war.
These are my homies. They've all been conscripted to fight in the war. It's hard to sit here on the other side of the world while your friends are in harm's way.
Organizers say they hope the rally sent a strong message.
We have to stop shootings. We have to stop bombing right now. This is what we want as of now.
This past week saw the end of some major COVID restrictions in the province, including masking mandates. Showing proof of vaccination is also no longer required, and venue capacity will increase, bringing about a huge change for Alberta businesses. As Micah Quinn explains, a Lethbridge pub is celebrating the return to normalcy.
We're ecstatic. We don't have to wear the masks. I mean, it's a choice that our staff or our customers can make if they feel like they'd like to, and that's not a problem at all.
Vicky Vandenhoek, the owner and operator of Honker's Pub and Eatery, says the team at the local bar had a meeting on Tuesday morning, and it was great to finally be able to see the smiling faces of staff.
You don't realize how much you miss that. And just sometimes people use facial expressions to pass hello, and when you can't smile or do that, it was missed.
On Tuesday morning, the Alberta government announced that Step 2 of COVID restrictions in the province have now been lifted. This means provincial school requirements, including cohorting, are removed. Screening for youth activities are no longer required, and capacity limits are now lifted for all venues as well. Limits on social gatherings are also removed. One of the biggest announcements was the provincial mask mandate being taken away. Masking is still required on public transportation, at Alberta Health Services facilities, and continuing care settings.
We've always said that public health restrictions in Alberta will only be there as long as they are absolutely necessary to prevent overloading our hospitals.
Restrictions have now been lifted for mingling between tables at restaurants and bars, along with a 10-person per table limit. Liquor can also be served without any time limits now as well.
The last time that we could not serve anymore after 11 o'clock, and they had to be out by 12:30. So if you were running an event that went, from 7 to midnight, well, then you couldn't have liquor service for the last hour, and then they had to be out within a half an hour.
The mandatory work from home requirement has also been removed. Isolation for COVID-19 symptoms or positive tests are still in place. Isolation periods are 5 days at home and 5 days of masking for fully vaccinated individuals, or 10 days for partially or unvaccinated people. Step 3 of restrictions will be lifted if hospitalization rates continue downwards.
Although provincial restrictions have been drastically reduced, some municipalities like the city of Edmonton have chosen to continue masking. But Premier Jason Kenney says he intends to impose a bylaw blocker where municipalities would not be able to override a provincial order, such as dropping mask mandates. With the leadership review set for April 9th in Red Deer, Jason Kenney says a simple majority would be enough for him to stay on as leader of the UCP party, adding that in a democracy, a majority is 50% plus one. We'll be right back with more after this. Welcome back. Lethbridge's Chinook Regional Hospital will be the home of some new intensive care beds. Alberta's health minister says the government will be spending $300 million over the next 3 years to add more ICU beds in hospitals. Jason Copping says $100 million of that will be spent this year to create 50 permanent ICU beds across the province. Copping says the COVID-19 crisis, which overwhelmed existing intensive care units, highlighted the need to add more beds quickly.
Lethbridge will be the focus for any new ICU beds here in the South Zone. Overall, our goal is to ensure maximum flexibility so the system can surge when and where it is needed, and resources can be redeployed to support other parts of the health system when ICU is not facing pressures. We expect these new beds to come online soon in the coming months.
Earlier this week, Premier Kenney announced a minor cabinet shuffle. Tyler Shandro is now the new Justice Minister and Solicitor General, and Casey Madu, who used to have that portfolio, will become the new Labour and Immigration Minister. Madu, who was our province's Justice Minister, had been suspended from the cabinet position following an investigation into a phone call he made to the Edmonton police chief 11 months ago regarding a distracted driving ticket. This week should have been the first time University of Lethbridge students were able to come back to in-person learning. Instead, the university's Faculty Association has completed its third week of a strike. Both the Board of Governors and the faculty are at a stalemate with their bargaining, and students just received notice that when the strike does end, the rest of the semester will be online. As a result, student solidarity appears to be rising. Many arrived at campus throughout the week to express their frustration and conduct a sit-in outside the president and vice president's offices.
We think that if they actually cared about us as students and the professors and actually were bargaining in good faith, they would have been at the table already. They would have resolved all this. Like in every other institution that has gone through this exact situation, they've already resolved all of their issues, and they have done it much more amicably than what is happening at this university. Like, it seems that they are using a scorched earth approach. They are trying to make an example out of us, and I think they really chose the wrong institution to be doing that.
We are the biggest stakeholders on this campus, and people need to start acting like we are. We pay their wages. We pay for them to work. We don't pay to get stuck outside of a strike that they knew was going to happen. We have students here who they're worried about their summer. We have students worried about their housing. We just got a letter from housing right now from students who are just told that if they have to extend the semester, they're going to be charged more to live there, which is ridiculous. This isn't our fault.
As part of the sit-in, students are asking for refunds on tuition, a vote of no confidence on the heads of administration, and an end to faculty restructuring. Meanwhile, an unfair labor practice complaint was filed by the University of Lethbridge Faculty Association against the university's Board of Governors. The complaint, which was filed with the Alberta Labor Relations Board, alleges the Board of Governors has refused to bargain seriously throughout the current round of negotiations and now refuses to come to the table to negotiate at all. The faculty's strike is now into its fourth week following 2 years of failed talks.
The University of Lethbridge Faculty Association has never refused an invitation to the table in 2 years. The same cannot be said of the Board of Governors side. And since the beginning of the lockout and the strike, the Board of Governors has received multiple unconditional invitations from Alpha to return to the bargaining table and negotiate. They have said explicitly 3 times, quoting themselves, that they don't believe that a meeting would be productive. And so they have in fact refused each of our invitations since the beginning of the strike. The faculty and the students at this university are tired of being treated by the Board of Governors completely without respect.
For their part, the University of Lethbridge says it's the Faculty Association that's refusing to meet at the negotiating table. They also say the university has ensured faculty members remain well compensated, and over the last decade, faculty have had pay increases of 34%. Coming up after the break, we have some exclusive information about the upcoming Conservative leadership race, and we hear from our legislative correspondent about possible election spending by the UCP. That plus more after the break.
So this was a fairly controversial announcement last fall that healthcare workers were going to need to get their COVID vaccine. It was sort of added to the list of shots they had to get, along with some of the other inoculations that were already mandatory.
Welcome back. We do at times expect flip-flops and election season spending from our governments. This past week, the UCP discussed reversing its controversial decision to require AHS workers to have up-to-date COVID vaccines. There has been so much more going on in Alberta this week, and to break down some of the issues, our legislative reporter and correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, and I spoke about the mRNA flip-flop, pre-election spending, and a ban on some Russian products here in Alberta. Take a look. Jason Kenney has asked Alberta Health Services to explore ending the vaccine mandate for healthcare workers in the province. What can you tell us about this?
So this was a fairly controversial announcement last fall that healthcare workers were going to need to get their COVID vaccine. It was sort of added to the list of shots they had to get, along with some of the other inoculations that were already mandatory. And it was quite controversial in some quarters and led in some locations to a number of people who would not have been able to actually go to work, which could have sort of impaired the function of some small town and rural facilities. So the deadline was originally like the end of November. They had to do this, and that was bumped back to December 13th, I think it was. And then it was almost kind of scrapped entirely already because the Omicron wave hit and sort of swamped hospitals and they needed all the staff they could get. The government sort of allowed testing to be done instead of having this vaccination requirement. So to some extent, the mandate sort of already has died a little bit, I think would be fair to say. But Kenney is asking AHS to sort of officially explore ways to repeal that, and the province might instead, should there be other waves or other concerns about transmission, they would maybe just test all workers and the government would pay for that. So there's some sort of options to be explored there. Not totally clear on a timeline or when that's going to happen or whatever, but that is sort of the, a bit of the backstory on the vaccination mandate.
Okay, thank you. Of course, major news this week, the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. As that continues, it seems that many are banning Russian products and services, including the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Commission. It looks like they've banned new stock of Russian liquor.
Right. So this has actually kind of happened all over the country. There have been Manitoba, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Ontario, I believe, have all sort of pulled Russian products from their shelves. And the AGLC, which regulates gaming, liquor, and cannabis in Alberta, is sort of doing the same, banning sort of the restocking of these products, I believe. And there's actually not very many of them, judging from other jurisdictions. You had, I think, maybe Russian Prince vodka was the big one, and then a couple other provinces had they had a beer or two from Russia. So, very much a symbolic move, I think is fair to say, but it is part of this much larger sort of movement of boycotts and sanctions and things like that are being done, sort of at the personal level in decision-making by regular Canadians, and also at the government level, the federal government level in particular, which has really leveled a lot of sanctions against Russian individuals and, banned flights in Canadian airspace and things like that.
Yeah, and of course, likewise, AIMCO, Alberta's pension management firm, right? So they'll divest from Russia-related investments?
Yeah, and they've got about $158 million worth of sort of direct and indirect exposures is sort of the term that's used to Russian investments, which again is like it's very, very little money. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but it's only about 0.1%, I think, of Aimco's overall investments. But yeah, they're going to be looking at that. So it's a similar sort of thing, arguably symbolic, but certainly part of this much larger trend that we're seeing right now.
Now, Tyler, there have been piles of funding announcements around the province. Perhaps would this be leading up to Kenney's leadership review next month? Do you think this could be laying the groundwork for that, or for next year's election, for that matter?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, there's so much political stuff going on at the moment that it's very hard to sort of separate these funding announcements from the sort of political machinations that are ongoing. We are about a year from an election. In theory, I mean, Jason Kenney could call an election tomorrow if he so desired. I have no indication that's happening, but our scheduled election is for next year. And there is the leadership review coming up in early April. So there is a little bit of a fire hose of spending happening right now, with a new hospital expansion in Red Deer, or renovation, I believe, a childcare center, the Red Deer Regional Airport getting some upgrades. And that's all just sort of around Red Deer, which is actually where the leadership vote is going to be held. And of course, this is also a symbol a little bit of a better than expected, better than forecast provincial budget. And now there's a little bit of money to play with. But I bring that up at this point just because, over the next year, I think we are going to see a lot of that sort of funding. We are going to see the UCP spending to try and shore up its reputation, I guess, in some of these jurisdictions where perhaps they see a fight with the NDP.
After the break, we speak with a member of Parliament about Trudeau's Emergencies Act and the Conservative leadership issues. Keep it right here. Welcome back. These are unusual times we're living in. COVID mandates are lifted in certain places, but not in others. It's been 2 weeks since the police violence brought an end to the Ottawa Freedom Rally. The Conservative Party of Canada needs to elect a new leader, and Russia stays the course to keep NATO forces away from its border, and so continues the conflict in Ukraine. Joining us to discuss this from Ottawa is Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas. What about the fallout from the Emergencies Act imposed by the Trudeau government? Many Canadians, and indeed many other nations, saw this as a significant government overreach. Should there be some kind of a better explanation from the government, or some kind of consequence for taking freedoms away from Canadians, not to mention freezing bank accounts in some cases?
Again, a really great question. And certainly, I think you're asking a number of the questions that Canadians are also asking. So when it comes to the Emergencies Act, really what we have to wonder is, was the threshold met in terms of whether or not it was reasonable or right for the Prime Minister to enact the Emergencies Act? Ultimately, the threshold is that the Prime Minister should have no other tool at his disposal or current law at his reach that would help deal with, the crisis at hand. Well, in this case, the Emergencies Act was invoked after we saw the border crossing in Windsor cleared, after we saw the border crossing in Manitoba cleared, after we saw the border crossing at Coutts in Alberta cleared, after we saw the border crossing in Surrey cleared. So all four of these borders were able to be cleared out, and the protests were resolved peacefully without the invocation of the Emergencies Act. So for the Prime Minister then to claim that he needed the Emergencies Act in order to bring, order back to Ottawa is just absolute ludicrous. It is incredibly disingenuous, in my opinion, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we see that the tools that the Prime Minister needed, or that the police needed in order to act, they already existed. The Emergencies Act was simply an overreach of power. It was a flex that the Prime Minister got to engage in order to try to salvage his own image. It was wrong. It was very, very wrong, I believe. Further to that, what we saw is on Monday, the Emergencies Act was passed in the House of Commons because the Liberals and the NDP teamed up on that. But then by Wednesday, the Prime Minister was making an announcement that he was actually going to be revoking the Emergencies Act. It was no longer in effect. What changed from Monday to Wednesday? Well, I can tell you this. Nothing in the downtown core of Ottawa changed within that 48-hour period of time. The only thing that changed was public opinion. And so I applaud Canadians for standing up and for speaking out, for making their voices heard, because ultimately I do believe that they applied enough pressure that the Prime Minister saw he was going to be made a fool of if he continued down that road. Again, I would draw people's attention to the fact that nothing changed in those 48 hours, which again should tell us that Emergencies Act really wasn't needed. The only emergency there was one that Trudeau created for himself. He needed to save his image.
Wow, unprecedented times, absolutely. These are. Rachel, let's switch gears once again. Your own party is going through some transition currently. Any thoughts on the CPC leadership race? Some see it as boiling down to a race between true blue conservatives like Pierre Poilievre and red Tories like maybe perhaps Jean Charest or Peter MacKay. What's happening there?
Sure. I guess I would maybe lead out by saying this, and that is my opinion on the matter is this. I think for a long time we've talked about, the reform conservative, the social conservative, the red Tory, the blue Tory, etc. We have these terms that we like to use to describe variations within conservatism. My hope is that in this race we actually abandon that practice. A conservative is a conservative is a conservative. And one of the things that we pride ourselves in as conservatives is the ability to span the right side of the political spectrum and hold, a variety of viewpoints within that framework. So really, I'm looking for those who are, leadership hopefuls to be able to clearly define the essential principles of conservatism versus the peripherals. And they're going to have to really do some soul searching and I think through what those critical items are in terms of our principles as a party. And then they're going to need a plan that they put in place in terms of how to adhere to those principles.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more local stories from around southern Alberta. Agriculture exhibitors gathered this week in Lethbridge to showcase their top products to improve ag production. The Ag Expo and North American Seed Fair kicked off on Wednesday. Lethbridge and District Exhibition CEO Mike Workington says agriculture is the lifeline of Southern Alberta, and Ag Expo provides the opportunity for the industry to come together.
And for us, not only is it a reopening, but it's also a relaunching of how we're going to program events into the future. Focused on key aspects of the agricultural industry, focused on key trade corridors with other ag markets in Western Canada, and focused on key import and export routes into the United States and overseas. Ag Expo really does set that stage, and for us to focus on the key commodity groups that happen here in Southern Alberta with the abundance of natural elements that we have here, it really creates the perfect canvas for an agricultural event here in Southern Alberta.
Students at the Lethbridge Collegiate Institute Arts Academy of Dance are making a comeback this year with a new show set to be performed next week at the Yates Memorial Theatre. As Angela Stewart explains, the students are excited to perform live once again after COVID-19 forced last year's performance to be virtual.
After months and months of rehearsals, these students are ready to lace up their dance shoes, hit the stage, and perform their new show, Awakening.
We've all been working so hard. We've been going after school. We've been practicing during lunch breaks. We just really want to make this show the best for coming back.
The title, Awakening, marks the return of live theater for the students since the pandemic, and the dancers say they can't wait to showcase their pieces.
It's going to be amazing. We brought in amazing choreographers, which have made so unique, cool dances, and we are really excited to show everyone.
Taylor Wickers, a grade 12 student and a member of the Academy since she was in grade 9, says the upcoming show has a lot of meaning to her.
It's very sentimental to me. It's my almost like going away show. I'm very thankful that I can do it in person, and I've been able to see how it was online with COVID, and the differences in the years have been just so drastic, and our productions and our shows have just grown.
Jordan Olson, artistic director for the Academy Dance Program, says they were able to work with some of the best dance choreographers again this year.
All of our choreographers had to be through Zoom. So we learned choreography, but the choreographer would be in Toronto in their apartment and we'd be in the dance studio. So this year we took those same choreographers and we flew them in from wherever they taught us last year, and we got to work with them live and in person, and it's just been like such an incredible experience.
Awakening will be jam-packed with tons of dance styles on March 13th and 14th. Tickets can be purchased through the NMAX Ticket Center or by calling the Yates box office.
March Madness is upon us, and that means playoff basketball is here. Locally, the University of Lethbridge Pronghorns basketball teams are preparing for postseason action this weekend. Nathan Ryder went to the university to catch up with the men's and women's teams.
The month of March is normally a time where people think of the NCAA's March Madness basketball tournament, but the University of Lethbridge Pronghorns have their attention firmly set on the Canada West basketball championships this coming weekend. The men's and women's team both earned byes into the second round of the tournament. The women's team finished with the 5th seed and will play on Friday against either the University of Manitoba Bison or the University of British Columbia Thunderbirds. Women's basketball head coach Dave Wachnuck says the team's versatility will challenge a lot of opponents.
That we have that versatility to play some different styles. I feel like we match up well with a lot of teams. So I like our advantages going into games, and really it's one game at a time. You can't look too far ahead.
The women's Pronghorns are also a very experienced group. Fourth-year guard Jessica Kenney says that playoff basketball is a lot different than the regular season, but the team's experience is a great asset.
And a lot of older players, and me personally, I've been in a couple different playoffs, so I think that'll help for sure, having that playoff experience. It is a lot different than regular league play.
The men's team will be at home at the First Choice Savings Center. The men finished with the 7th seed and will take on the winner of Thursday night's game between UBC Okanagan and the University of Manitoba. Men's basketball head coach Jermaine Small says the team has had a Game 7 mentality all year.
A Game 7 mentality. So every game, I wanted them to feel like every game's a playoff game. I think there'll be a little bit of nerves just because, for guys that have been here before, like Chad and Jeff, and, I think there might be a little bit of nerves, and maybe our new guys will have nerves, but I've told them all year, we got to play like it's our last game, and I think that will translate into Friday night.
For some graduating players, this weekend will be the final games of their college basketball careers. Forward Chad Oviatt says he is looking forward to leaving everything on the court.
Yeah, being at the end of my career, it's a little bit more special, a little bit more anxious about it. I need to get things done this time around.
After the break, a special interview with Lethbridge East MLA is on deck. Keep it right here.